Long ago, the world knew an age of light and glory. Kingdoms thrived, and magic was a force for good, used for healing and protecting mankind. However, this golden age came to an end when the gods of darkness descended from the skies and unleashed their curses upon the mortals. On a moonless night, the balance was shattered and the world was submerged in shadow. The damned were a legend among the people, immortal warriors corrupted by an ancient pact, destined to serve the gods of darkness. In life, they were heroes. In death, they became monsters, cursed to live as specters, soulless, without peace, but bound to an impossible mission. For centuries, the damned lay imprisoned in a forgotten crypt beneath a mountain untouched by men. The seal that kept them bound was weakening, and the winds began to whisper of an ancient force returning, one that could change the world's fate. And so, on a stormy night, the awakening began. In the small village of Valrik to the north, a young sorceress named Elara sensed something was wrong. Since childhood, she had experienced strange visions of a dark future, but now more than ever, the feeling that something deadly was about to happen was undeniable. When the chilling winds began to howl with an unusual sound, she knew that the end was near. As Elara walked through the forest, guided by her instincts, she came upon something that should not exist, an ancient altar, hidden by trees older than the world itself. In the center of the altar, a black stone pulsed with an evil energy, radiating a power that made the air around it thick and oppressive. As she touched it, Elara felt a surge of energy course through her body, and a vision took hold of her. At the heart of the vision, she saw the damned, warriors in crumbling armor, their faces grotesque and disfigured, with eyes hollow of soul. They were awakening, ready to fulfill the mission given to them, without forgiveness, without remorse. In that moment, Elara knew that the world would never be the same. The legend of the damned was about to become reality, and the bloody legacy they carried would be the end of all she knew. But one question burned in her mind. Who had broken the seal that kept them imprisoned? And what did this mean for the fate of humanity? Before she could think any further, the sound of drums echoed in the distance, as if something was drawing near, something that brought with it the promise of death and destruction. The damned were coming, and nothing.
As Elara's vision faded, the air grew heavier with an ominous presence, as though the very earth itself were holding its breath. The black stone in the altar pulsed with a rhythm she could feel deep in her bones. She stepped back, her mind reeling from what she had just seen. The damned, warriors from a forgotten time, were stirring, and their return would mark the beginning of an age of darkness. The winds howled through the trees, carrying with them whispers of ancient horrors. Elara's heart raced as she hurried back to Valrik, knowing she had to warn the village. But the closer she got, the more she could feel the change in the air. The village, once peaceful and quiet, now felt suffocated under a heavy, oppressive gloom. On her arrival, she found the villagers gathered in fear, whispering anxiously. Something had happened, something they couldn't explain. The crops had begun to rot overnight. Animals were disappearing from their pens, and a strange, unnatural fog had rolled in from the mountains. It was as if the land itself was rejecting life. The village elder, Master Dorian, greeted her with a grave expression. His once fiery eyes were now clouded with unease. "Elara," he said softly, his voice trembling, "the darkness is spreading. We felt it in our bones. You must leave. Go to the capital. The king must be warned. But Elara wasn't ready to leave yet. The vision she had seen was clear. The return of the damned wasn't a distant prophecy. It was happening now. The capital was too far, and the king was unlikely to listen to a mere sorceress from a small village. Elara needed to understand more. She needed to find out who had wakened the damned and why. Before she could speak, a loud crash echoed from the outskirts of the village. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a terrifying sound filled the air, a guttural, unnatural growl. The villagers screamed and scattered, but Elara's gaze was fixed on the dark silhouette emerging from the forest. It was one of them. A figure clad in tattered armor, its face hidden behind a darkened helm. It moved with unnatural speed, its presence overwhelming. As it stepped closer, Elara could feel the air around her grow cold and thick with dread. The creature stopped just at the edge of the village. Its voice was low and raspy. "The seal is broken. The time of the damned has come." Elara's heart sank. She knew this day could come, but to see it unfold before her eyes, the damned had returned, and their army was rising. The figure raised its hand, and with a terrifying screech, dark tendrils erupted from the earth, tearing at the ground itself. Elara summoned her magic instinctively, throwing up a barrier to protect the villagers, but the tendrils were too strong. The power of the damned was already beyond her control. In the distance, another figure appeared. This one was taller, more imposing, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. The creature extended a blackened blade, and in an instant it swung down, severing the tendrils and stopping the attack. "Enough," he growled, his voice commanding. He turned his gaze toward Elara, locking eyes with her in a way that sent a chill down her spine. "You will not stop us, sorceress. The damned rise, and this world will know its end." The ground beneath Elara's feet rumbled again, and the village began to collapse. She knew then that the shadow had already spread too far. The capital, the king, and the entire kingdom were now under threat. But one question remained. Who among them had released the damned, and could anyone stop?
The village of Valrik lay in ruins. The dark tendrils had torn through the land, leaving nothing but scorched earth and broken homes in their wake. The air still carried the acrid stench of death, and the once peaceful forest surrounding the village now stood silent, as though mourning the destruction. Elara stood amidst the devastation, her heart heavy with sorrow. The villagers had fled, but many had not survived the attack. Master Dorian had been among the first to fall, his body now just another victim of the damned's unholy wrath. She had barely managed to escape with her life, retreating into the dense woods as the creatures of shadow closed in. But now she was alone, no allies, no answers. Her mind was consumed by one burning question. Why had they come? The damned were ancient, their souls bound by a curse that should have kept them imprisoned for eternity. Someone had broken that seal, someone had released them, and now the consequences were clear. The mark. As she ventured deeper into the woods, Elara could feel it, an invisible weight upon her, pressing down with each step. It was as though the forest itself was watching her, waiting for something. She closed her eyes, focusing on the magical energy within her, trying to sense the truth. The vision came to her again, the figures in tattered armor, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes glowing with the fire of vengeance. But this time, she saw something more. One of them, a warrior standing apart from the others, was marked. A symbol burned into his skin, the same symbol she had seen on the altar in the forest. The mark of blood. It was a symbol of ancient power, a cursed sigil that bound the damned to their master, and now it was calling to her.
The mark had been placed on someone close. She didn't know who, but the connection was undeniable. Determined to learn more, Elara followed the trail left by the dam's path of destruction. It led to the edge of the kingdom, where the land began to darken under the weight of the shadows. As she entered the borderlands, she encountered a group of survivors, refugees fleeing the terror that had spread from Valebrook. They spoke in hushed tones of strange occurrences, whispers of a dark cult rising from the shadows, worshipping the very forces Elara had seen in her vision. One name stood out among them, a name spoken with fear: Valrik. "Valrik is the one who brought them back," a young man said, his voice trembling. "He's a sorcerer, a former student of the Royal Academy. I heard he was exiled years ago for dabbling in forbidden magics. But now they say he's returned, and with him, the damned." Elara's heart skipped a beat. Valrik. The name echoed in her memory, a faint whisper from her past. She had heard of him once, a brilliant but dangerous sorcerer who had disappeared after being cast out for his experiments with necromancy and blood magic. If he was behind the awakening of the damned, then the world was in far greater danger than she had feared. With the mark of blood now etched in her mind, Elara set her course toward the capital. The king must know what was happening. Valrik's return was no coincidence. He was the key to everything. And somewhere, hidden in the heart of the kingdom, the answers she sought awaited her. But the road to the capital was treacherous, and the damned were already moving through the land like a plague. Elara knew that time was running out. Every step she took, every decision she made, would bring her closer to a final confrontation with the dark forces threatening to consume the world. And with the mark of blood growing stronger in her mind, she realized that there was more at stake than just the fate of the kingdom. Something deeper, something far darker, was brewing in the shadows. The damned were just the beginning. The journey to the capital was long and perilous. Elara moved through the darkened countryside, where the presence of the damned could be felt in every step. The land seemed to wither under their influence. Crops were rotting before they could even be harvested, and the air had a constant chill like the grave. Every village she passed was either abandoned or smoldering ruins, with only the occasional survivor too terrified to speak of what they had witnessed. The whispers of Valrik's return were spreading like wildfire. His name was feared and loathed, but even more troubling was the dark cult he had amassed. They were known as the Bloodbound, a secret order that had existed for centuries, worshipping ancient deities of decay and destruction. With Valrik at its helm, the cult had grown powerful, far more powerful than Elara had ever anticipated. But she couldn't afford to be distracted by the growing fear. The capital, Eldoria, was her destination, and she had to get there before it was too late. She had to warn the king. The gates of Eldoria loomed ahead, tall and imposing, with soldiers standing guard at their entrance. Elara approached cautiously, knowing that her arrival would not be unnoticed. She had been traveling for days without rest, and the cloak of exhaustion hung heavy on her. The weight of her mission, of the fate of the kingdom, was beginning to take its toll. As she approached the gates, a familiar voice called out to her, "Elara." She turned, startled, and found herself face to face with Darian, a former knight of Eldoria, who had once been a close friend. His armor was battered, his face worn, but his eyes still held the fire she remembered. "Elara," she whispered, relieved but also wary. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask the same of you. What's happened to you? What's going on in the kingdom? The rumors, they're everywhere. There's talk of the damned, of the bloodbound. Eldoria is not safe, Elara. You shouldn't be here." "I've seen them,"
she said, her voice firm but trembling. "I've seen what Valrik has done. The damned, they're real. He's broken the seal, and now the kingdom is doomed if we don't stop him." Darian's expression hardened, and he nodded gravely. "I know. I've seen the signs myself. The king, he won't listen. The court's become obsessed with power and politics. We're too divided, and with the cult gaining influence, I fear it's already too late." "Elara," Darian hesitated, lowering his voice. "I have information. A way to stop Valrik, but it's dangerous. It may not even work. We need to reach the Citadel of Souls. It's the only place where we can find the power to break the curse he's unleashed." "The Citadel of Souls," Elara murmured, the name a cold whisper from her past. The Citadel was a place of dark magic, a forsaken temple that lay at the edges of the kingdom, far beyond the capital. It was a place of power and fear, where the forbidden magics of old had been sealed away. If what Darian said was true, then it was the last hope for saving the kingdom. But there was no time to waste. The capital had already begun to feel the weight of the dam's influence. Eldoria's walls, once impenetrable, now trembled with the energy of dark forces pressing against them. "We have to go," Elara said, steeling herself. "There's no other way. If we don't stop Valrik soon, there will be nothing left to save." Darian nodded, and together they made their way into the city, a city now shrouded in an eerie silence. The streets were empty. The usual bustle of Eldoria's markets and squares was replaced by an unsettling stillness. As they entered the castle, Elara could feel it, the presence of something unnatural, something old and malevolent. The king's throne room, once a place of grandeur, was now dimly lit, shadows clinging to the corners like something alive. The courtiers stood in quiet groups, their faces etched with fear, but the king himself, King Aldric, sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. "Your Majesty," Darian spoke, bowing low, "we need your help. The damned are rising, and the bloodbound are gathering their forces. The kingdom is on the verge of collapse." King Aldric looked at them both, his eyes hard and unyielding. "I know what's happening, but there is nothing we can do. Valrik's power is too great. Even with all our armies, we cannot defeat him." Elara's heart sunk. "Then we have to stop him from the source. We must reach the Citadel of Souls. There is power there that can undo the curse he's unleashed. It's our only chance." The king's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "The Citadel is a dangerous place. No one who has entered has ever returned." "Then we make sure we return," Elara replied, her voice firm with resolve. King Aldric studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well, but be warned, Elara. If you fail, if you bring more darkness to these walls, I will have no choice but to make sure you never leave." Elara stood at the edge of the throne room, the king's words still echoing in her mind. There was no time for doubt. The kingdom was on the brink of destruction, and if she and Darian could not reach the Citadel of Souls, all would be lost. The king had given them his reluctant blessing, but his faith in her seemed to be running thin. As they left the castle, the weight of the city's despair pressed down on them. The streets, once vibrant and full of life, now felt cold and empty. Shadows stretched long across the cobblestones, as though the sun itself feared to shine on the city. Darian walked beside Elara, his face grim. "I can't help but feel like we're racing against something far darker than we realize," he said quietly. "Even the king seems like he's given up, but there's something else, isn't there? Something we're not seeing." Elara nodded but said nothing. She too felt the growing weight of the unseen forces bearing down on them. There was an ancient malevolence in the air, something that wasn't just tied to Valrik's return. No, this was something deeper, something that tied the damned to the very fabric of the world. Where exactly is the Citadel of Souls? Darian asked as they neared the outer walls of Eldoria. And how are we supposed to get past the armies Valrik will have surely stationed in the way? Elara paused. The path to the Citadel was perilous, and even if they somehow made it through the mountains, they would face countless dangers. The Citadel wasn't just a place of dark magic, it was surrounded by deadly creatures, hidden traps, and worse, the very land seemed to resist those who tried to enter. There's an old route, one that's been lost for centuries. It's said to be protected by those who were once loyal to the gods of light, but when the world turned dark, they disappeared. If the stories are true, we can use it to bypass the majority of the threats. An ancient route? That sounds a little too convenient, Darian remarked skeptically. Elara gave him a sharp look. I don't have time for doubts, Darian. We'll take the route and pray it leads us where we need to go. As they neared the city gates, Elara felt the presence of someone watching them. She turned sharply, her senses heightened, and there, standing in the shadows of an alleyway, was a figure cloaked in dark robes. At first glance, the figure seemed to be one of the cultists, the bloodbound, but as it stepped into the dim light, Elara's heart skipped a beat. It was Varen, a former companion from her past, someone she had trusted. Varen! What are you doing here? Elara exclaimed, her voice full of disbelief. Varen's piercing blue eyes met hers, his face hidden beneath the hood of his cloak. I knew you would come, Elara, he said, his voice calm, yet full of an unsettling resolve. You've been searching for the Citadel of Souls, haven't you? Elara narrowed her eyes. You've joined the Bloodbound, haven't you? Varen gave a soft chuckle, but there was no humor in it. You think too simply, Elara. There's more at play here than you understand. Valrik is not the true enemy. What do you mean? Darian interjected, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Varen turned his cold gaze toward Darian, but did not answer. Instead, he fixed his eyes back on Elara. I've come to offer you something that might be able to tip the scales in our favor, but only if you trust me. Elara's mind raced. She had not seen Varen since their days at the Royal Academy, where they had studied magic together. But even then, there had always been something about him that felt off. She had heard rumors that he had fallen under the influence of dark magic, but this was beyond anything she had expected. You want me to trust you after everything that has happened? Elara said, her voice sharp. You're with them now, aren't you? The Bloodbound. Varen's expression softened for a moment, but there was a flicker of something darker in his eyes. The Bloodbound are just puppets. Valrik is a puppet, but the forces behind him, they are far older and more dangerous than you can imagine. If you want to stop this, you need my help. Elara hesitated. Trusting him would mean breaking every instinct she had, but something about his words resonated with her. She could sense the truth in his voice, even if it was buried under layers of deceit. Why should we trust you? Darian demanded, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword. Varen smiled, but the smile was devoid of warmth. Nothing is ever just black and white, Darian. You've seen that by now. I offer you an alliance, not because I expect anything in return, but because if Valrik wins, there will be nothing left for anyone, not even me. We all have a part to play in this war, whether we like it or not. Elara exchanged a long look with Darian. It was clear they had little choice. The king's army was no match for the rising darkness, and even if they succeeded in reaching the Citadel of Souls, they would need more than just magic to defeat Valrik. If Varen had knowledge of something that could help them, they had no choice but to accept his offer. Fine, Elara said at last, her voice resolute. We'll join forces, for now. But any betrayal, Varen, I swear you'll regret it. Varen gave a small, knowing nod. I would expect nothing less.
The alliance with Varen was uneasy at best, but Elara and Darian had little choice but to trust him, for now. Together they made their way through the desolate lands toward the fabled Citadel of Souls.
The journey was perilous, as the influence of Valrik's dark cult seemed to stretch far beyond the capital. Each day the sky grew darker and the air grew heavier with malevolent energy. As they traveled, Varen revealed more about the true nature of the threat they were facing. He spoke of an ancient force that had been quietly pulling strings from the shadows, an entity older than even the damned themselves. It was the one that had truly set Valrik on his path to power, manipulating his every move. Valrik is but a pawn, Varen explained, his eyes glinting with a mixture of fear and respect. He's chasing immortality, but what he doesn't understand is that the price for such power is far greater than he can comprehend. Immortality isn't just a gift, it's a curse. To become a true vessel for this dark force, Valrik will have to sacrifice everything: his soul, his will, and the very essence of what it means to be human. Elara's mind reeled. She had heard whispers of forbidden magic, but this was something far darker. A force that could twist the fabric of life itself, that could undo the very nature of existence. "And if Valrik succeeds?" Darian asked, his voice filled with dread. "Then he will become something worse than the damned," Varen said, his eyes low and chilling. "A creature that can never die, that can never be stopped. A being of pure darkness, feeding on the souls of those it consumes." Elara's stomach twisted. If Valrik succeeded, it would mean the end of everything, not just the kingdom, but the very balance between life and death. They continued their journey in silence, each of them burdened by the knowledge of what was at stake. But the road ahead was long, and the shadows growing stronger with each passing day. Elara knew that they had no time to lose. They had to reach the citadel before Valrik did, or before his dark power consumed everything in its path. But there was another question that weighed heavily on her mind. Would she be able to resist the same temptation that Valrik had fallen prey to? Could anyone wield such power without paying the price? As they neared the mountains that guarded the citadel's entrance, Varen turned to them, his expression grave. "You should know," he said quietly, "that once we enter the citadel, there's no turning back. The trials within are unlike anything you have faced before. The cost of success is steep, and failure would mean the end of everything." Elara met his gaze. "We have no choice but to continue." And so they pressed on, knowing that the trials ahead would test not just their strength, but their very souls.
The path to the Citadel of Souls was treacherous, winding through the jagged peaks of the Black Spine Mountains. The air was thin and bitterly cold, and the land around them seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. But as they reached the foot of the mountains, Elara felt a creeping sense of unease. Something far worse awaited them. At the entrance to the citadel stood a massive, ancient stone archway, its surface etched with runes that glowed with an eerie blue light. Beyond it, the land seemed to twist and warp, as if the very fabric of reality was being manipulated. "This is it," Varen said, his voice heavy with both reverence and fear. "The entrance to the labyrinth of bones. The citadel itself is hidden deep within this maze, a place where the dead walk, and the past is forever bound in the walls." Elara's heart pounded as she stepped closer to the archway. The air inside the labyrinth was thick with the scent of decay, and an oppressive silence hung in the air. The further they walked, the more Elara felt as though they were being watched. The labyrinth itself seemed to be alive, shifting and changing with each step they took. The walls were lined with the bones of ancient creatures, long-forgotten beasts, the remains of those who had entered the citadel and never returned. "This place, it's not natural," Darian said, his voice barely a whisper. "How many have died to protect the citadel's secrets?" Varen's face darkened. "More than you can imagine. The labyrinth was designed to test the resolve of those who seek the power within.
Only the worthy can pass through it, and only those who know the true nature of their quest will survive. They ventured deeper into the labyrinth, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. The bones beneath their feet seemed to groan as they walked, as if they were alive, watching and waiting. The deeper they went, the more Elara felt the weight of the place bearing down on her. This was no mere trial of strength. It was a trial of the spirit, a test of their very souls. Suddenly, the path before them twisted, and a towering figure appeared out of the shadows. It was a being unlike any Elara had ever seen, part human, part creature, its body a mass of rotting flesh and skeletal remains. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its voice echoed in her mind. "You have entered the labyrinth of bones, mortal. What is it that you seek?" Elara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the creature. "We seek the power to stop Valrik, to undo the curse he has unleashed." The creature's eyes narrowed, and it let out a low, grumbling laugh. "To stop Valrik, you must first stop yourselves. For the true curse of the Citadel is not what you seek, but what you will become if you dare to take its power. Will you pay the price?" The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the labyrinth seemed to shift once more, as if the very walls were closing in. Ilara's heart raced. They had come so far, but the true test was only just beginning. "What will you sacrifice to win?" the creature asked, its voice growing louder, more insistent. Elara, Darien, and Varen exchanged uneasy glances. The trial had begun, and it would not end without them confronting their deepest fears, their darkest desires, and the price of immortality. The labyrinth of bones twisted and writhed around them like a living creature, its ancient walls shifting in response to their every movement. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the weight of forgotten souls. The creature they had encountered, a terrifying guardian of the labyrinth, had vanished into the shadows, leaving them with only the echo of its question, "What will you sacrifice to win?" Ilara's mind raced. She had seen dark magic before, but this was something different, something that threatened not only their lives, but the very essence of their souls. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the labyrinth itself was trying to claim them. "Stay close," Elara whispered to Darien and Varen. "We can't afford to be separated. We don't know what's ahead." But the labyrinth was a master of deception. No matter how closely they walked, they found themselves facing illusions, memories, and fears that tested their resolve. Dark figures of the past, ghostly apparitions of the damned, appeared before them, taunting and tormenting them with the visions of their greatest regrets. Elara saw her mother, long dead, calling out for her to turn back. Darien was confronted by the sight of fallen comrades from his knightly days, their accusing eyes fixated on him. Varen's past was far darker, faces of those he had betrayed, his own reflection twisted into something unrecognizable. Ilara's heart clenched as she realized what the labyrinth was truly asking. What were they willing to lose to stop Valrik? They pushed forward, ignoring the whispers, the illusions, the pain. The labyrinth was not only testing their courage, it was showing them the price of their ambition. If they wanted to emerge victorious, they would have to sacrifice everything they held dear. Eventually, the path led them to a large chamber, the air thick with a sense of finality. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, a glowing crystal resting atop it. The crystal shimmered with the same dark energy they had encountered in the village and the capital. Elara could feel its power pulsing, calling to her. "This is it," Varen said quietly, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. the source of Valrik's power. If we destroy this, we can stop him. But it won't be easy. Destroying it will unleash a torrent of energy. Elara stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached toward the crystal. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a surge of magic coursed through her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of power and a cold, gnawing hunger. "Don't!" Varen shouted, but it was too late. The chamber shuddered, and the ground cracked open beneath them. Dark tendrils shot from the walls, wrapping around their legs, pulling them toward the center. The crystal shattered, releasing an explosion of dark energy that sent them flying back, crashing to the stone floor. As the energy surged around them, Elara's mind was filled with visions of Valrik, his dark figure standing in the heart of a storm, the very air around him crackling with power. His laughter echoed through her mind. "Foolish mortals. You think you can stop me? The power I seek is beyond your comprehension. You are nothing but pawns." Elara struggled to her feet, her body aching from the blast. But she knew one thing for certain. This was the final battle. There would be no turning back.
The storm raged outside, as if the world itself were trembling in anticipation. Valrik's power had begun to spread like wildfire across the land. His dark forces were already moving, and with each passing hour, more villages fell, more people were consumed by the growing shadow. But Elara, Darian, and Varen were not yet defeated. Though the crystal had shattered, the battle for the kingdom's soul was far from over. They had one final chance to strike at the heart of darkness, to face Valrik and put an end to his twisted reign before the world was consumed by shadows. The trio made their way to the citadel's deepest chamber, where the true source of Valrik's power, the heart of darkness, was hidden. It was said to be a relic of unimaginable power, a dark heart that pulsed with the energy of the very first curse ever cast upon the world. It was here that Valrik sought to bind himself, to merge his soul with the ancient darkness that had guided him. The walls of the citadel seemed to close in around them as they descended into the heart of the mountain. The air grew heavier, the darkness suffocating. Elara could feel the weight of the place pressing against her, as if it were alive, watching, waiting for their every move. At the end of the dark corridor, they found it, the heart of darkness. A massive obsidian orb suspended in midair by threads of dark magic. The room around it was a place of swirling shadows and twisted stone, and as Elara approached, she could feel the power radiating from the heart. This was what Valrik had sought to harness, an energy so dark it could twist the very fabric of reality itself. "You should not have come," Valrik's voice echoed from the shadows. He stepped from the darkness, his form now fully transformed by the dark power he had embraced. His eyes glowed with a malevolent fire, and his body was surrounded by an aura of pure darkness. "You think you can defeat me, Elara? You are nothing. Your magic is weak. Your resolve is brittle. You cannot stop me. Not now, not ever." Elara's heart hammered in her chest, but she knew what had to be done. The heart of darkness had to be destroyed, no matter the cost. The fate of the world rested on this one final act. "We'll see about that," she said, summoning all the magic she could muster, her hands crackling with energy. Darian stepped forward, his sword drawn, ready to face whatever horrors Valrik would throw at them. Varen stood silently, watching, his expression unreadable. His past had led him to this moment, and whatever secrets he had kept from them were now irrelevant. The battle for the kingdom was all that mattered. With a final determined breath, Elara cast her magic toward the heart of darkness. The orb pulsed in response, the very air around them trembling as Valrik's power fought back. But Elara would not stop.
She would not let the darkness win. The final bloodshed was upon them, and this time, it would be the darkness that would fall. The chamber shuddered with an unnatural force as Elara's magic clashed against the heart of darkness. Her hands trembled with the sheer weight of the power she was channeling, but there was no turning back now. The orb pulsed violently, its dark energy clashing with her own. Each wave of energy sent waves of searing pain through her body, but she held firm. Valrik stood before them, his form a dark reflection of the man he once was. The power he had sought to control had consumed him, turning him into something far worse than mortal. His eyes glowed with a malevolent fire, and his voice was a mocking whisper in her mind. "You think you can stop me, Elara, you who have always been a pawn in the game of fate?" Valrik's voice resonated like thunder. "I've seen your weaknesses, I've seen your fears, and now I will use them against you." Elara's heart raced, but she refused to yield. She had seen too much, lost too much to turn back now. The world would fall into eternal darkness if she failed, if Valrik's twisted vision became reality. "You will never win," Elara spat, her voice rising in defiance. "You may have the power, but you don't have what it takes to wield it. You've become nothing more than a monster." Valrik's lips curled into a sinister smile. "And you, Elara, what will you become? You think you can stop me? You think you can wield the power of the gods without paying the price?" As he spoke, the shadows around him began to twist and writhe, coiling like serpents, trying to reach out and strangle the light. The walls of the citadel seemed to pulse with a dark rhythm, as though the very structure itself was alive, feeding on the chaos that Valrik had unleashed. Darien stepped forward, his sword raised high. "We won't let you destroy this world, Valrik. This ends now." "Your resolve is weak, Darien." Valrik's voice echoed through the chamber, and suddenly Darien's body froze. The shadows gripped him like chains, pulling him toward Valrik with inhuman strength. Elara's heart clenched as she saw her companion struggle against the darkness. She reached out, summoning every ounce of her magic to free him, but the force of Valrik's power was too great. The shadow tendrils coiled tighter around Darien, squeezing the breath from his body. "Let him go!" Elara shouted, her magic crackling and surging around her. She hurled a blast of energy toward Valrik, but he absorbed it, laughing darkly as the shadows deepened. "You are nothing, Elara, nothing but a tool." But Elara, in that moment of desperation, realized the truth. She had always been the tool of fate, shaped by her past, her choices, her magic, but she was not powerless, not anymore. She cast her gaze toward the heart of darkness, the source of all Valrik's power. The darkness had consumed so much, and yet it had left part of itself vulnerable. The heart pulsed with a raw, chaotic energy, an energy that could destroy everything if unleashed, but one that could be controlled. With a deep breath, Elara made the choice. She would take control of the darkness. She would use it not as a weapon, but as a force to undo Valrik's twisted ambition. "You were wrong about me, Valrik," she said, her voice steady, despite the tremor of fear coursing through her veins. "I am not a pawn, and I will not let you destroy this world. This power, it belongs to no one." With a shout, Elara focused all of her energy into the heart. The world seemed to fall away as she merged with the power, her very soul intertwining with the darkness.
Pain racked her body as the power surged through her, but she gritted her teeth and held on. This was her choice, her reckoning. Valrik screamed, his form beginning to dissolve as Elara's will began to overpower his. The heart of darkness, once a force of pure malevolence, began to pulse with a new energy. The dark shadows that had once obeyed Valrik now turned upon him, wrapping him in chains of his own making. "No!" Valrik shouted, his voice a mixture of rage and fear. "This is impossible!" The shadows consumed him completely, and with one final earth-shattering explosion of energy, the citadel of souls trembled. The darkness that had gripped the world for so long began to fade. The heart of darkness shattered, its power scattering into the ether. Elara collapsed to her knees, her body battered and broken from the ordeal. The energy coursing through her slowly ebbed, leaving her breathless and weak. But the battle was over. Valrik was gone. Darien rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "Elara, you did it! It's over!" But Elara could barely hear him. She had won, yes, but at what cost? The power she had wielded was not something that could be taken lightly. She could feel it, an emptiness in her soul, a price she had paid to stop Valrik and his twisted ambitions. We stopped him," she whispered, her voice weak. Varen, who had been standing silently, nodded. "But the darkness has not been eradicated. It still lingers in the world, and so must we. The reckoning has come, and we must live with its consequences." The citadel, once a place of unimaginable power, now stood as a hollow monument to the battle that had been fought. The storm that had raged outside began to fade, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds. The kingdom would survive, the people would rebuild, but for Elara, Darien, and Varen, the true reckoning was only just beginning. They had saved the world, but the scars of the past would never fade. And so they walked out of the darkness, knowing that though the battle was won, the true cost of immortality was something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives.